I missed the cold.
You missed the cold. God bless.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shalom.
And dear colleagues, thank you. David Beckman, thank you. And all of our friends who are tuning in this morning, thank you. Let us begin by thanking God for the gift of learning Torah together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
וערב נא אדוני אלוהינו את דברי תורתך בפינו ובפי עמך בית ישראל ונהיה אנחנו וצאצאינו וצאצאי עמך בית ישראל כולנו יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה ברוך אתה אדוני המלמד תורה לעמו ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
So Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
As we all know, this week we are approaching the 1 year anniversary of the lockdown, the 1 year anniversary of the time that we closed our building physically and imagined ourselves in this online way. And the meta question that I would like us to think about this morning on the 1 year anniversary is, to what extent are we changed only temporarily, and when we get back, it will just be a bad memory and we'll be like we used to be? Or to what extent have we been changed more permanently? And by we, I mean not only us as individuals, but our Judaism and our Jewish community. In what way has Judaism and this synagogue and other Jewish institutions just been temporarily changed, inconvenienced? In-person classes are now online. And when we go back, everything's going to be back the way it was pre-pandemic. Or to what extent has the year that we've been through actually had a long-range impact that the Judaism that we practice after the pandemic, the synagogue that we live after the pandemic, will in material ways be different? That's our meta question. And the way I want to access that question is to begin with my colleagues and ask you to think about the Judaism that you live. And what we're searching for here is the delta, the change, the impact of the pandemic. So, as I shared in the teaser, Neil Gilman, in his book Sacred Fragments, brings the teaching of Mordechai Kaplan, the famous teaching about the 3 B's, that there are 3 ways that we can identify as Jews: behaving, that's what we do; believing, and belonging. And what I want to ask us to think about is, if you were to put yourself in your pre-pandemic mindset, pre-coronavirus, if you're looking at those 3 B's, is one of them more important to you than the others? Is one of them more urgent than the others? Is one of them where you live? Or are they all kind of co-equal? And we'll first have that conversation, and then we're going to revisit that conversation a second time. Now, in light of the pandemic, how do you evaluate the 3 B's? So, Elias, I'll start with you. If you're thinking about behaving, believing, belonging, pre-pandemic, which of them would be paramount to you, if any one of them is paramount to you?
Right. Yes. So, it's. I love this topic. Thank you for bringing this up. It's a great conversation. Hopefully, we are going to have. I want to start with a reflection of what you said with how the future is going to look for us. You know, when we are at home quietly in Newton, and all of a sudden, a storm comes. All right, and we have wind and everything, and it's the night. We don't know what the aftermath is going to look like until the next morning. So I compare that to what we are experiencing now. We are in the middle of the storm, and we don't know what the Judaism is going to look like after the storm. We'll have to wait to see. Wait and see what a world it could be. You know, I only said that in order to sing this song. So anyways, no, but then I always believe that the first B is the most important among all, which is behaving. And by behaving, I'm not talking about being a super halachic Jew, because we are not. I drive to the temple. You don't. You're more halachic than me. And right. But behaving, I believe, by behaving about, experiences, the richness of the traditions of the Jewish people, celebrating holidays, um, all kind of different things that doesn't make us fully halachic, but that we have to keep and maintain in order to go from generation to generation. That for me has been always the most important. If I have to categorize them,
Right.
it will be behaving, belonging, believing. I always remember you was teaching the kids in, I think it's 4th or 5th grade that we normally use before the pandemic. We used to teach them how to put into film, and everybody would be like, this itches and it's uncomfortable. And you say, the more you do it, the more you'll grow into it. So I've been doing this, what I do, for more than 30 years. I'm still working on my faith. I hope I get my faith before I retire. But
Elias, before we leave you, could you say a word about belief, which came in last for you? Tell us about the status of belief for you, your third place candidate.
Well, to be honest with you, I believe in God. I believe in God. It will be sad and scary if I do what I do. I don't believe in God, okay?
You wouldn't be the first.
Right, exactly. I do believe in God. I don't think that that is the most important pillar among the three of them, okay? Because we have to accept it that it's a struggle for many people, among us as well. And I don't know, sometimes I think about the big picture of Judaism, and I think about, the destruction of the temple, the Middle Ages, the persecution by the church, the Inquisition in Spain, the pogroms in Poland, the Holocaust. And you say, can you believe in God, that the God we believe allowed all this to happen? So those are the questions that I have. But then in my personal life, when something beautiful happens to me, the first thing that I want is I cannot wait for Shabbat morning looking at the ark and to close my eyes and to thank God for what happened to me.
Yeah.
And serious about that. So, it's a mix. It's a mix of feelings and emotions. And I struggle with that.
Before we leave you and before we leave belief, could you just say a word as a dad? Last night was a first for you and for us. Mikey and David were part of the instruments that made of the musicians that made Shabbat Alive possible. Talk to us about what it was like to not only see your sons, your growing sons in shul, but to do the service with them.
And how does that relate to believing?
Well, you talk about believe because you want to believe in God. You talked about believing in good things, and when something good happens, you can't wait for Shabbos to bring that to the ark. And last night, I think it would be a good thing that you were there with your grown sons and they were inspired to participate.
It was a blessing. There is no other way of describing it. A blessing. There was, when we do what we do, we are usually immersed in what we are doing, and we are so focused on that. And then, we have to admit it that at times it's hard to connect to what we do because we are so focused on that. But then there are moments who are sublime. And I was singing, I think we were singing Miss Morshir or one of those, and then Brian, our cameraman, decided to put Mikey and David together on the shot. And it was like this, boom, like this. To my heart, my voice cracked a little bit. I was able to regain myself. But it was like, those are the emotions you cannot describe with words. And I'm grateful for what I do, and that, you can say that is perhaps believing,
Okay. Lord Nesson, behave, believe, belong. Are they co-equal for you before the pandemic, or was one more important than the others?
So for me, before and during, it hasn't changed. And for me, Elias and I come down on the same page. It's really about I think it's really about behavior. So I was thinking about that also. So in terms of behavior, I think that behavior, and really Elias and I we're actually literally on the same page, because I think behavior leads to community, and then because community kind of dictates what the behavior is going to be. not only halacha, but the behavior of the community is what we do, and then that leads to belief. And you talked about storm, and you talked about destruction of the Second Temple. I was thinking about that too. This is not the first time in Jewish history, and perhaps this is somewhat less dramatic, where where what Judaism looks like prior to an event, as opposed to after the event. Think about the destruction of the first temple, the destruction of the second temple, and what Judaism looked like before and after, especially after the second temple, and when we just had no place. But even between the two Babylonian exiles, when we had when Judaism, when we came back from Babylonia with the prophets, and what Judaism looked like then, and it was different, and the fact that we could have a Judaism in which our homes become mikdash ma'at, as opposed to having to actually be physically in Jerusalem to make a sacrifice. So Judaism, has there have been times when what it looks like before and after the event, is substantially different, but yet there's a core, and I think the core has to do with behavior, which again leads for me, leads to the behavior dictated by the community, which leads eventually to belief. So that's yeah.
Dan, do I take from what you just said, your comments, that you, in terms of the meta question, that you think that the pandemic is going to be as decisive a change agent on the Jewish story as the exile and the destruction?
No, I don't think so. I think it's not going to be as dramatic, but I was saying that this is not the first time in Jewish history where outside events beyond, certainly beyond our control, have dictated what a Judaism looks like. What conservative Judaism looks like, and Reform Judaism looks like a year from now is.
Right.
Conservative will look different, I think, for the most part.
Right.
I don't think Orthodox Judaism is going to look any different, because I don't think that in most Orthodox settings they've actually changed behavior. And in the Reform, I think the Reform has been doing what we've been doing, with live stream and with Zoom and all of that. They've been doing that for a long time. So I don't think really that has actually changed substantially also.
Dan, but
Yeah, and can I say just
Sure.
two little things? The first one is that I always struggle with this idea of encountering people, in my old country and here too, where they will tell you, I don't eat kosher, I don't go to the temple, I don't put on tefillin, I don't celebrate the Jewish holidays, but I feel Jewish. I always struggle with that, and I don't like it. Second,
But by the way, good morning. Let me introduce you to your congregation. No, Elias, let me introduce you to your congregation.
no, but I didn't listen belong.
No, but that's a substantial. Let's just pause there. That is a substantial majority, not a majority. That is a substantial majority. Well more than half of the members of Temple Emmanuel and of the conservative movement would say, I don't keep kosher, I don't observe the Sabbath the way you do. I do, I travel and I use my wallet and I buy and I spend.
About me?
No, I'm talking about. But right, and I don't, the halacha and all this good stuff is not my thing, and I don't pray and tefillin. My grandfather had it. Maybe it's in some attic. Maybe, but and don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to do. But being Jewish is something I feel in my heart. That's your congregation.
Okay, but the question is,
That's your congregation.
everybody's welcome under the Lord, so don't take my word. But the question is, and let's be honest here, Ledor Vador. I love singing that paragraph on Shabbat mornings. I love the prayer. What, with that kind of Judaism, what are you transmitted to the next generation?
Well, that's a good question, but that happens to be our question. And I guess what I want to say to both Dan and Elias, and Michelle, I want to get you in a minute because I know you have a whole different tack. But on the behavior problem, I think there's a built-in paradox to both of your answers of behavior, which is you both stress behavior, and our members don't stress behavior. That's not the way they live their lives. The way if you were to have an honest conversation with members of Temple Emmanuel, they'll say community, community, community. Like our God is community. And if you said, well, but out to fill in, if you said, well, you're at legals, what about just ordering the kosher tuna? if you ask them, what about like mincha tonight, right? But they feel Jewish. So I want to just say that you, because of your choice, you've created a world where you're at variance with the people in our shul. You emphasize conduct and behavior, and you could say it's not halacha, it's mitzvah and Torah, which is safer, softer language. But most of our people aren't there.
Yeah, I see your side of it, and I never said that neither one is important. I'm saying that, to me, that is the most important thing. And yet, although all the things you are saying truth about our members, yet they send our kids to religious school, they do the bar mitzvahs, they come to celebrate Purim, Passover, high holidays. All right, so it's a dual thing.
Right. Okay.
And the other thing I would just say that just to be clear, the question that you asked was about how I interpret
Right.
this as opposed to our members. So I think
Right.
I was answering it not for other people but for myself.
I
Right.
thought for a minute you were talking about me, but anyways.
Okay. My friend Michelle, would love your input on the 3 Bs.
So I love what you said, Elias. It's just incredibly touching about the import of behaving. And Dan, the way that you set it up as a ladder was, I think, really profound and really a traditional way that I've always seen the 3, because of course the question is a little crazy. You actually can't have any of these without each other. It's like having a table that
Right.
doesn't have all of its legs. But I love how you stacked them and you said, first we'll behave. And then we'll feel like we belong because you look at somebody else, ooh, he's wearing a kippah. He's belonging to me. You have that sense. And then you cultivate the belief. And I think before the pandemic, I would have said that theologically, philosophically, I sort of believed in that ladder, right? That we come in through, you light Shabbos candles, and eventually if you light Shabbos candles long enough, you'll start to feel the light, you'll start to feel part of the Jewish people who always light Shabbos candles, and then you'll come to believe in God. I would say on a personal level, though, I probably would have stacked them a little bit differently, because I am a people person, so I come to shul to talk to the other people who are at shul. So I probably would have said in my own trajectory that it would be belonging, that sense of I am a Jew, and therefore I find my people, I find my tribe here, and therefore I behave as a Jew. So because my peer group does this, I want to do it with them, and so it boils down to that ultimate sense of belonging. I am energized in a room filled with people who are praying, and so I pray. And of course, there's the disconnect that you and I experienced, Elias, when we went to Poland and we saw the ashes of the Holocaust. And there was really a period of Jewish life for which believing was completely off the table. I mean, I think that there was such a profound trauma to the Jewish soul that for a long time, including Mordechai Kaplan and Neil Gilman, who you brought here today, really couldn't access believing. And as a rabbi, I saw myself as sort of reconnecting our Jewish life back to God in a place that had been broken. And that's another B that I would bring in, because there's a real brokenness in our Jewish connection to believing. And I would have said belief, you always say, God goes whoosh. God goes whoosh. It's hard. Believing is the hardest one. And then came the pandemic. And suddenly, everything shifted. I'm going to be honest here, guys. It was really important to me not to use electronics on Shabbat. That's like a really important part of my personal practice. And it was important for my children. It's important for how I love the way you're looking at me.
How is that going?
Right.
How is that going?
Right. I mean, when I came to shul, I wouldn't hold my microphone. It had to be somewhere that somebody else set up for me. And that just broke in the pandemic. That's no longer.
And that's not coming back.
And that's not coming back. And there's a way in which that's just profoundly painful to me, but it's also reality, because this is where we live, and I'm delighted we get to learn with all of you this morning. It is so incredible that the way the pandemic has connected us through this technology that really is not how we behave as Jews. And I see that there are some ways in which it has been transformative to the ways in which we're able to belong, to connect to each other. But that too got broken for me because I love that you're all here. I miss seeing you. I don't
Wait,
feel...
wait a minute. How do you know that there are people on
Right.
the outside? You're only looking at the TV monitor.
Right. And that's exactly it. And that's maybe my belief in action, right? I can only see the three of you. And I think the pandemic took away my belonging also because I can't come and just come to Kiddush and have that be my Judaism. I have to, there has to be something else. And I think there's a very real way in which believing has become the primary mode of accessing Judaism for me personally, my connection to God and my faith and my hope and the stories of our people who have been here before, as Dan points out, not here literally, but other really hard places. And those stories give me hope and faith and strength to be able to face whatever it is that we're in this moment, and connect me to God who's with me all the time, even when my community can't be, and even when I'm not doing the things that I used to do in order to connect in those ways. And I see it, it's not just me. I actually hear it from a number of people, the way in which God and hope has helped, like the idea that there could be a world that we're creating after is really an implanting of faith and God and promise in people's lives that they have to have that in the abstract. They don't come with that planted in their soul. The cultivation of hope is one way in which we're all seeking God at this time. So believe
Wes, I need to
more
ask
in
you
the
a question.
pandemic.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question, Wes.
Yeah.
Can I?
Well,
Can I just?
question first.
I've got. Yeah. I want to just respond. I want to hear you deeply and respond deeply, Michelle. So you're saying belief used to, if I understand you correctly, that before the pandemic, there was an order that you light Shabbos candles first, then you feel the Shabbos candle power and you feel belonging to a people that light Shabbos candles, and then after you do it and you feel belonging, then belief in God who gave us the Torah, who gave us et cetera, and that the effect of the pandemic has been somehow to make belief a primary vehicle for people to feel like there's going to be an end to this, there's going to be better days ahead, we're going to get to the other side of this.
Yeah, or God, or I need God in this moment. At 2 a.m., I'm up, and my mind is racing. And where do I turn? Who do I turn to? I might never have got a prayer in that moment, but now I do.
So in other words, the very desperation and urgency and brokenness, to use your fourth B word, the very brokenness of this moment somehow creates a connection with God and belief. Okay. So just before, and then I'm happy to hear your question, but what do you do with the fact, in this belief, with, the 500,000 Americans who are dead?
Look, I think we have a template for exactly that throughout our entire Jewish history, which is that, and Neil Gaiman expresses it very well, which is that we can look at God as the one who's the miracle maker who makes everything okay, but that's actually not classically how we look at God. We look at God as the one who gives us strength to persevere, to be there and to rise to whatever moment that we come. We look to God as the one who has created us and invested in us a certain responsibility. I think we've done that a lot in the pandemic. Like, our world is broken, and how do I hear God's call to me to repair? And so I think that the ways in which we have suffered profound and tremendous loss are absolutely something that we could get stuck at, laying at God's feet, and we could look no further. But I think our tradition asks us to look at tragedy and to see not only a God who has abandoned us, but a God who is calling us.
Wow, thank you, Michelle. Elias, you had a question.
Yeah, two things. One quickly. Always brilliantly, you are the best rabbi ever. You bring the best text for us to discuss. And one of them, you are a great rabbi too. Anyways, you brought the Igdal, the
Yes.
Igdal that we say on Fridays, and there are a couple of footnotes there saying that Maimonides created this, and then later, 2 centuries later, somebody based the Igdal on the 13 principles of faith, and that didn't took off much, the 13 principles of faith. So Judaism always struggled with faith as a general concept. That's
Right.
one thing to know. That is really important. And interesting enough, it says that the Hasidim don't recite Igdal, Interesting. Anyways, so my question is the following to you, my dear Rabbi Garden Schwartz, Lord, Lord investor of the cantorial chair. So you said before we talked about our members, all right? Not keeping kosher, not doing anything, and this and that, all right? And yet they belong here.
Yes.
So if there are no pressures for all of them in terms of behaving as a Jewish people, why it separates them from belonging here instead of belonging only to the JCC? Where is the
Right.
Jewish environment? You can do exercise, you can do anything you want, cultural activities. There is no pressure, you have to keep kosher and different things. So, can you explain that to me?
Yeah, so great. It's a great segue for I'll weigh in and I'll try to answer your question. So for me, pre-pandemic, and I think the pandemic has only deepened this, the most important B by far is belonging. And I guess I'll start with the pandemic, that the pandemic has just revealed how much loneliness there is in our world, how much isolation, how much depression, how much disconnection. I mean, this is literally the truth. There was a pandemic of loneliness before the pandemic of coronavirus. And the pandemic of loneliness of something like half of Americans feel that they are alone and lonely. So huge numbers, heartbreaking numbers of Americans eat their dinner watching TV alone. They have dinner with Jeopardy at 6:30. And they don't talk to anybody, don't see anybody. And that was before the pandemic, and then the pandemic, of course, just exacerbated that. I think if you think about religion as a response to human need, the basic need that humans have is for connection with humans. The basic need that humans have is for relationship. And that's always the case, and the pandemic has exacerbated that. I think we are having a crisis, capital CRISIS, of loneliness. A crisis of loneliness and desperation. And that brings, it goes without saying, depression, anxiety, sometimes suicidal ideation, deaths of despair, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, et cetera, harmful behavior. That's everywhere. That's also here, right? And that's before the pandemic, exacerbated by the pandemic. It's in that context, I think, that religion is its best medicine and the best tonic to a soul, and that's our finest day and our finest calling, which is to be a place of belonging. The place that my most sacred text, I just want to call it out, is on page 12 of the handout, which is the song from Cheers. Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You want to be where everybody knows your name. Be glad there's one place in the world where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You want to go where people know people are all the same. You want to go where people know your name, and that is us. That's
So
us.
you bring
the Cheers rally.
Kushner, you bring Kaplan, you bring the Torah, you bring the Tanakh, and then you said that the
Yes.
most important thing is cheers.
Cheers, absolutely. That we are the place where you go where your name. And then
Jesus
I wanna,
Christ,
but
Moshe
because-
Rabbeinu.
No, but Elias, because you say that there's no Talmud in Talmud class, and why don't we ever study Talmud in Talmud class? So I just want to make my case for belonging, and this is before the pandemic, and all the more so, Allah has come of a comma after the pandemic. This is, and we've talked about this before, I'm not going to read it closely, but the last page of the handout is from Ta'anit. Ta'anit is a tractate of the Talmud, so I hope you're happy. And it tells
Epic,
the
Wes.
story. Yeah, there's a first time for everything. No, and it tells the story of Choni, the circle maker. And, Choni, the circle maker, is the Jewish Rip Van Winkle, and he goes to sleep, and he wakes up 70 years later, and he goes where nobody knows his name. Right? He's the anti-Cheers. Right? Nobody knows his name. And he goes to all the places where they would know his name. And, in fact, in the story, it's his descendants. It's his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And they don't know his name. And in the end, he dies. He dies of a broken heart. He dies of the pandemic of aloneness and of loneliness. And at the end, now, the story is famous for the coda, which is Omi tuta o chavruta, give me fellowship, give me community, or give me death. But he doesn't say it because he's already dead. It's said actually by another scholar, Rava, looking at the fact that Choni died. Rava says, you know what, if you don't have a community, you're dead. Okay, that's the end. Okay, so I think, to me, this is cheers. Everyone wants to go to a place where they know your name. You hear about Choni who dies because he doesn't have it. I think belonging has always been the most important thing. The pandemic has made it even more important. Now, therefore, what is the place? Now, your JCC question, which is a very fair question. So I've often thought about, so I think that we need content for community building. We need content for belonging. Just to play a mind game, just a crazy counter-narrative game. Let's say we decided to become the Netflix synagogue. Like, all we were going to do is watch Queen's Gambit and Virgin River and just, and the
I
best.
recommend Tehran, the Israeli
and Tehran,
show.
and
Tehran is
we
very good.
just, all we would do is watch Netflix that everyone's been binging on for the last year, right? And that's what Temple Mount does. We're the Netflix synagogue, right? There's not enough content to sustain. So what we need is, first of all, we need mitzvot that we wrestle with, and we need beliefs that we wrestle with. We need the Yigdal prayer that we sing, but we don't exactly believe, but we want to believe, but we don't believe, but we aspire to believe, and we'll keep working on this next week. And so we need content, but to me, the point of the prayers and the point of all the mitzvot that we do or don't do or struggle to do is to create this web of human connection. It's all about belonging. It's all about belonging. That's my view.
Okay.
I have a couple things. First of
Yes.
all, I think one of the things a different way to look at this, which may be helpful, is to not look at it in a linear way, which I think all of us are doing at the moment. I think it's really more, it's a cycle, and it's actually more a gyre, because there are times when belief is more important, there are times when community is more important, and there are times when when behavior is more important.
That's fabulous, but what's a gyre? What's a gyre?
A gyre is a
That is
circle.
the reason he's called Lord Nelson.
Yeah. What's a gyre?
A gyre is a circle that keeps moving higher
Ah,
and higher.
okay, keep
Yeah,
going.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
But,
Yes.
and Michelle, I want to go back to, and thinking about that, I just want to go back to one thing that you said, which was related to the Holocaust, which is the idea that you thought that people didn't experience faith.
Oh no, there are definitely people. I mean, I would definitely say there are people for whom their faith came on fire
Right.
through the Holocaust.
Yeah.
We saw that too.
Too,
I
yeah,
mean,
okay.
there was some gorgeous, particularly music that was created, Anima Amin,
Yeah, I was
where
gonna say that, yeah.
thinking and
Yeah,
the
Dan, but
ways
you
in
have
which
to
people
recognize
pray.
that
But
so many, people who survived the Holocaust, they wanted to
They
do
lost
nothing
it.
with
Yes.
religion.
No, I
correct. But
understand
there was a
that, yeah.
generation, I think, that was broken
Yeah, I
from
agree.
the sort of the Holocaust as
So,
a whole.
Michelle, can we just pivot for a second on
Yeah.
that comment?
Oh,
Because
okay.
well, and then you can say what
Okay.
you want to say, but this has just been a Michelle Robinson-ism forever, so the whole year, which is, we're talking about generations that are broken. I want to kind of pivot for a second to the ways in which Temple Emmanuel is going to be compromised or weakened or changed in not a good way as a result of the pandemic. And I know one of the things that you've been just totally obsessively and appropriately focused on is a lost generation of our children. And could you talk about that?
It's heartbreaking. I mean, I wouldn't say we were hitting it out of the ballpark on children's attendance before the pandemic. I think we already had a thriving, and we still have. Thank you, Eileen Beckman. You are absolutely extraordinary and amazing, and Wayne Goldstein, just lifting up our kids through this pandemic. But we have an incredible religious school. Right, on Sundays, they come and they're running around these halls, but on Shabbos, it was often a struggle to get families here. But I think we actually were making a fair amount of headway. There was a way in which we had a number of families for whom you wake up on Shabbos morning and you come here, and your belonging becomes manifest through your behaving by showing up, and then there is a belief that's implanted within each of these kids, and that we can't. Where are our children? Our children can't come together on Shabbos right now, and the behaviors of watching their families. I mean, I don't know about for you, but for me, I was shaped by going to shul and sitting under my father's tallis wrapped up in the tactile feeling of being hugged and loved under that tallis, and running around shul with all the people who just knew me, who knew my name, and that experience is not happening right now, and I'm worried. Are we going to come back? And then are they going to come back with us?
Yeah, I want to say something. You know, my son David goes to Schechter. He's in 7th grade in Schechter. There are, in total 40 kids. 40 kids, all of them Jewish, obviously. And so Mikey's best memories are the 40 bar mitzvahs he attended. You know, the experiences of going to different shuls, see their own friends celebrating, coming to an age that, you do the chanting and this beautiful thing and celebrating with the party, which is a very important thing. And but all that is gone.
And it's not the same.
David's classmate had one bar mitzvah,
right.
one bat mitzvah in person, and since then, Zoom bar mitzvahs. So what is the impact that 15 years from now, all these kids are going to
correct.
remember?
That keeps
So could
me,
you
that
answer
keeps
that by
me up.
9:15?
Yeah. So that keeps me up at night. Right. That keeps me up at night
it will
because
be very hard for them to go back and to think about all these bar mitzvahs, and even bar mitzvah in Zoom. They will say, yeah, it was wonderful. It was, but they will grow up one day, hopefully, and they will have kids, and they will say, wow, my experience was exactly the opposite as what you are experiencing right now.
But I'm
with
also
some
worried
kind of
about
pain,
I'm also worried about the way in which we've supplanted services, physical services, with Zoom services. I mean, Jonathan Tatelman is doing an extraordinary job of running a service in terms of content every Shabbos. You talk about behaving, belonging, right? And believing. So he's got the behaving and the believing part, down. I think just super high quality content. And over the months, I've watched as it's gone from, the kind of crowd we would normally get on a Shabbos morning down to, 2 sets of siblings who go to Jonathan's service, and going to Jonathan's service from your living room is, no matter what he's doing on the other side of the screen, is not as compelling as being
can I
here.
back to what I said about the storm? We don't
Yeah.
know the impact
Yeah,
that
but
the storm is going.
so I just want to thank you for naming that. I think one of the big challenges we're going to have, and I mean, the meta question is this pandemic just an inconvenience and a bad memory and we'll recover? Or is it the exile, or is it the destruction, and it's going to change Judaism permanently in ways we can't even begin to anticipate? I'll tell you how, and I don't know the answer. I wouldn't pretend to know the answer, but I think the question is a real-life question. It's not at all clear to me that we're not going to be changed permanently. It's not at all clear to me that we're going to just go back and this will all be a bad memory. And I'll tell you when I got that. One Shabbat, we were, for my son's birthday, we were not in Newton. We were at an Airbnb in the Berkshires to be away with Sam for his 30th birthday. And on that Shabbos morning, I was listening to our service on
Seriously, you have nothing else to do
yeah,
when
no,
you're
no,
on
no,
vacation?
No, I'll tell you what it was. So I took in
He was
the
behaving.
service. No, it was Hannah Gonzalez's bat mitzvah. And I would have listened to it anyway, but loved the Gonzalez family, Rebecca Gonzalez. It was Rebecca Gonzalez's bat mitzvah, January 9th. And I was doing it so I was listening to the service while doing my workout. And I thought to myself, oh my God, this is amazing. If I wasn't a rabbi, I would do this every week, because you get the workout, and you get the singing, and you get the community, and you get the belonging, and you get the Torah, and you get the community, and you get the aliyot, and you get the connection. And I could say my prayers in my own way while I was doing my workout. And I thought to myself, our synagogue is going to be super challenged to get people back, because if you could do your workout and also catch a service, and you don't have to get dressed, and you don't have to put on a tie, and you could just do it at home, that's going to be really tough to come back from that. And how we
yet
could get
we
people to
need each
come
other.
back
Right.
Right. So I think it's very much an open question. So I guess here's the question I want to ask you. None of us knows the answer to this question, but all of us have this question. What can we do now on the 1-year anniversary to maximize the chance that we'll be able to recover our community and reclaim our community and go forward in strength? What can we do now to recover? What can we do now to reclaim? What can we do now to make sure we're going to be as strong as possible? And to, I loved your framing, Michelle, that you could say, God, this is at your feet and it's your problem, or you could say, God, you're calling us to fix it. How can we see God calling us to fix it?
So I actually want to answer that question partially by looking at your Cheers text, which you filtered through the Honi story.
Yeah.
The Honi story has always been troubling for me because while I understand what the rabbis wanted to do with him and to speak about how important community is and you can't live without it, it's always been troubling to me that Honi couldn't go to a new place and make a new community, make new connections, reinvigorate what he had before. It's like it's a failure of Honi's imagination that he can't find himself making new connections. And I think we're going to need to think really hard about Honi and his story when we come back, because we're going to need a lot of imagination. We're going to come back and it's going to feel like we've been sleeping for 70 years.
And it's super scary and super cautionary because the guy dies.
Right.
The default energy is dead. He dies.
Correct.
And the default energy is dead, and it's a cautionary thing that wakes us up. How do we not die? How do we thrive? How do we go even stronger?
And I think that's going to require of us re-envisioning how we see our belonging, how we can recreate our belonging, how we can reinstitute our behaving, and most importantly, how we can find with each other a sense of believing. Because if you go back to page 11, you brought this beautiful text, which is from Vayishlach, about, he replied to Jacob, said he, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with beings divine and human and prevailed. And I think that's our challenge. That's what this sacred space is for us to strive and challenge each other on a human level, and also to continue to work and to strive in asking ourselves, what is God calling us to do? And that's what this place is for and why it matters that we not fall into Choni's trap.
Thank you. Lord Nesson.
So I think that the pandemic has shown, and you've said this, Wes, that there's so much disconnection that people have, so much angst and so much, depression, and it really has to do with the fact that human beings, created in God's image, need community, need physical community. We need to be with each other. We need to hug each other. We need to hold each other. We need to be in each other's presence. And I think that once we're able to do that again, that'll be much better for all of us. Whether it changes the way that we function as a Jewish community, it'll change. But that this is really important, that when we come back, that we have the opportunity to come back, people are going to want to come back because they're going to want to be physically in physical proximity to each other. That creating of community, which really leads to all the other things that we've been talking about. And what Michelle said is absolutely right. We're going to have to try to figure out a way in which our community continues to be relevant in people's lives. And if that means programming, if it means changing the way that we create worship on a regular basis, keeping this, getting rid of that, re-envisioning everything. I think the essence is that once we come back, people being with each other is going to be central and really the most important thing we're going to do.
Right. By the way, separate note, when we finally do get back, we have to be very mindful. All of our muscles, our social muscles have atrophied. Like we've forgotten to be with each other. We've been trained over the last year to see another human as a threat. Like if I'm walking down the street and I see another human, I go to the other side. And if they say me, they go to the other side. And that's actually proper pandemic conduct, is that humans are suspicious to you, right? And so all of our social muscles, like I want to come near you and close to you and talk to you, etc., all that stuff is atrophied. So just note to file, we have to relearn how to be people again. Elias.
Yes. So Several things. I would recommend watch a lot of Netflix. That will be good for you during this time. You know, interesting. I started the morning with this idea that behaving is the most important thing. But you helped me visualize that belonging is the most important thing. And why? Because if you stay home and you do the workout while you're watching services, nobody will know your name.
Thank you, my friend. So, so I want to end the class. My dear friends who are watching online, I want to end the class by asking you for two things. I want to end with two different asks. And note that the first Seder is 3 weeks from tonight. Believe it or not, Pesach, the first Seder, Manish Tanah Halayla Hazeh, 3 weeks from tonight. So in view of that, and of course we all know it's not going to be a usual Pesach. It's going to be more Zoom, socially isolated, socially distant, not the kind of Pesach we've had all our life. It's going to be much closer to last year than what we had before last year, etc. So here are my two asks. First, can you give us, and can you give yourselves, and can you give your families 1 hour tomorrow from 10 to 11, and join in. I'm going to be teaching a class from the Rabbi Chill Sanctuary on how do we take the brokenness of this moment, the depression, the edge, and channel it into our best Seder ever. How do we take the pain and the pathos and the poignancy and channel it into the best Seder ever? That's our challenge, to have the best Seder ever this year. And I want to kind of role model how we could do that. But second, and even more importantly, in terms of behaving, believing, and belonging, we want to create a community of studiers, of learning, small learning groups. And tomorrow we're going to try to launch. I mean, this is fabulous. However many people are on here, 253, whatever it is, screens. We love this. But we would like to get 10 people, either on a Zoom call or 10 people outside socially distanced with masks, etc., learning Torah regularly. And we're going to be doing that at the end tomorrow. So can you give yourselves 1 hour from 10 to 11 to figure out how to make the best Seder ever out of the reality that we're living now, and to launch study sessions and study groups, and all clergy, all 5 of us are going to be helping you partner with that and help you launch that. So in the middle of all this, we're going to be doing a lot more behaving, believing, and belonging. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shkoch.
Shalom.
And there were 13 pages in honor of Yigdal.